Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming to see the show tonight, and also for staying for our conversation with you. I'm Vicky, I'm the artistic director. I'm lucky enough to direct Ali's play, and this is Ali, the writer. Tell us, Ali, a little bit about where this play came from, why you set a play in future.
Yeah, okay, so it took me quite a long time to get it in, didn't it? I was late, which I'm not usually. I'm usually about 20 minutes early for every meeting I have, and then I walk around the block for 20 minutes. And, so it was kind of, I was getting very stressed about it. And the reason was I was writing, I wanted to write about Gilda, about Jess's character. Usually with a play, that's how it starts for me, is the character will just sort of wander into my head and sort of say, hey, I'm the next one, how's it going? And I go, oh, okay, we'll find what's going on with you then. And when I was kind of toying around with it, and I thought, oh, okay, I've got it. It's about this woman, and it's about her daughter. I gotta say, it's so nice to actually be able to talk about this without feeling like I'm spoiling anything. so it's about this woman and her daughter, and I was like, okay, and they're kind of they're away from home. They've been evicted. It was always to do with Gilda, her daughter, and home, and either they were being evicted, or they were looking for a new home, or they were moving, or it was always that, and I just couldn't quite make it work. I was like, no, this isn't really. None of this is kind of singing, and it's a long time I was playing around. I think I did about 3 halves of plays just with this, and they were always the same, and there are little bits from those that are in this as well, but it just wasn't working. And then one day I just kind of got so frustrated I kind of just broke off doing anything, and I was like, well, I'm going to prat around with this Pluto idea I had, because I had this a few years ago. I just thought, I just had this idea for this place on Pluto that'd be kind of this weird psychological kind of horror thing.
Shall we open it out? Because I'm really interested in what you all have to say and the questions you have to ask.
I was just wondering, what's real and what isn't?
You know what? Yeah. I mean, I'm glad we've got this early on, because I'm gonna give a very irritating answer now, which is I'm not going to explain. I'm not going to explain. I'm not going to tell you what's real, what's not. I'm not going to tell you. I mean, because it's I have a very rock solid. I know what is going. I have my. But just because that's my version, I don't think that's fair for me to put that on anyone else. And I think anyone else's reading of it is just as valid as mine. I mean, I find that any time that I've explained or over it or did anything, it diminishes it. It makes it it's just it's just that, and I don't think even the reason that I have for everything, I don't think it is just that either. I think there's all kinds of weird subconscious stuff going on I didn't even know about. I mean, all the time we were rehearsing it, we'd be doing a bit, and I'd be like, oh, that's because of the thing, and they'd be like, well, yeah, you wrote it, and I'd be like, yeah, sorry, yeah, I mean, and other really bizarre stuff. I remember when I finished writing it, I realized that just before I started writing it, my mum sold the house I grew up in, and I was like, oh shit, so that's kind of worked its way in there. But I just find that more and more the stuff that I like, and all I'm trying to do is write more stuff that I like and I'm into, is that it echoes for a bit longer. It's not the end, full stop, and it never. And I think the really clear way to do that is to just, a question is always more interesting than an answer, I think, and I like the idea that it can bridge out, and that maybe hopefully some of you carry it around for a little while. And I also would say, if you get the book or if you come watch it again, I definitely would say it rewards second viewings, and that's not just me trying to pay off my mortgage. I'm just saying, I think, when I was writing it, the drafting process was. What's weird is I think when you watch it the first time, the second act feels so different from the first act. But if you go back to it again, the first act is doing all the same things the second act's doing. It's just doing them in little ways that are just gradually picking away at everyone. So yeah, I totally didn't answer your question, but I hope that's okay. Yeah.
But actually, my answer to your question is that in terms of the way we rehearsed it and what we did, it is all real. So we never got to a bit where we went, this isn't happening. There are complex reasons for it all, but it is all real. None of it doesn't happen. Yeah. Another question? Yes, somebody there. Thanks, Zara.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
If this is a play about Gilda and her daughter, and the people, how does the science fiction element change those relationships and the way that we see them, do you think?
Yeah, okay, so how did it change once I realized it was out in space, basically?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would say not a vast... I think people who have not like this and maybe not like some of my other stuff, I think find some of my plays maybe a bit gimmicky because there's a lot of monsters and time machines and weird shit going on, and I completely understand that. But in my defense, that I don't sit writing a play going, okay, this is about Gilda and a door. It's a bit boring. How can I, like, you know, sex this up a bit? And then, all right, I'll throw them out in space. That's not the process. All of these things. Going out to Pluto came because if you're writing a play, you're trying to get as close as you can to like an emotional truth, like a human honesty. You're trying to get closer and closer. And I'm just going to kind of slightly repeat sound bites I've said elsewhere now. But if I'm writing a play and I'm trying to write about people and I'm trying to write about feelings and dreams and all, you know, these things, there just gets to a point where like naturalism just like isn't quite enough because life doesn't really feel particularly naturalistic to me. It just feels like a big mess of all kinds of shit. And Pluto, time machine, monsters, whatever, all of these things just come out of me trying to get closer and closer to like a heartbeat, and eventually it's like, well, I don't know if sitting on a sofa is going to do it anymore. I think we need to like push past that. And Pluto, I mean, again, without over-explaining anything, Pluto, it's kind of, the play's not about Pluto, but Pluto sort of does all kinds of weird, there's all kinds of weird things about Pluto. Just the fact that it's like, it's a planet and not quite a planet, there's something kind of quite British underdoggy kind of thing about Pluto, you know? And at one point, when they were discovering it, they thought it was this planet X, which was this planet that was throwing off other orbits, and then it turned out to not be that, so it was called Planet X for a while, and then not called Planet, and it's just also, it's the furthest possible place in like the general imagination. Like when you think of like the furthest away from home, like Pluto's probably in the list somewhere if we're doing Family Fortunes, you know? And I think, and a big part of me thinks when I was just watching it there and thinking about it, I was thinking, if you lose someone that close to you, if you lose your mother, if you lose, you know, partner, anyone who's been just your entire life, basically, I feel that I can't speak from a vast amount of experience, but I would say that would possibly feel like being stranded on Pluto, you know.
Yes. Wait for the microphone.
How many people are on the station?
How many people?
1, 2, 3.
There's 4. It's 1, 2, 3, one in the freezer. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's a spoil. I mean, that's what is revealed in the second act, is that she wasn't there for all of them. You know what I mean? She was just there for guilt. I mean, I think that line, she has that line at the end, she says, I love you so much, you're in all of everything. And here we go, I can do my very highbrow reference points now. So, Ulysses. I'm going to hold my hand up and say, I've still not finished Ulysses.
I thought it was going to be the terms of endearment
We can talk about terms of endearment too. But Ulysses, there's the last chunk is Molly Bloom talking about when she's proposed to, and it's like a big stream of consciousness about this day in her life, and the word yes just like punches in there. I went down and yes, and went to the flowers and yes, and yes, and yes, kind of blah, 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 it's all through there like a kind of virus. And the idea being that this moment when she said yes was just such a massive thing, and it just did everything, and it just opened everything, that yes is everywhere. And I kind of thought, oh, that's interesting, like what, because I feel that that's probably, again, not speaking from vast amount of experience, well, it's like when you have kids, it's like, well, I've had this kid, the kid has always been there. It's been there even when he wasn't there, you know what I mean? Like after a while, once it's grown up a bit, and I thought, okay, so I love you so much, you're in all of everything, like every single memory I have, you're there, because you were always there, because you always were going to be there, because everything, you know? I mean, I remember when I finished it, and even when we were rehearsing it, I remember talking about the science fiction, bring these two questions together smoothly. I remember just thinking, like just imagining some guy sat in there being like, oh, it's just about loving your mum? I thought it was Space Ghost. What the fuck is this? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's some kind of disappointment. But I think that's the thing. It's like, it's weird. Like the play's got the most obvious genre trappings of anything I've done. We're on a space station, you know, there's a space suit, but I think it's not interested in sitting in that genre particularly comfortably. And
I think that also, what Ali's just said answers your question about how does the mother and daughter relationship, how is it different in space? And I think the things that Ali plays with about space to do with time and losing your mind and the sense of loneliness and understanding that in a much greater way in Pluto than if you were in Sloane Square, or maybe not. But actually, that enables the relationship to be examined in that way. So when we realise that Matty's been born later, or if we do, we don't have to have realised that, by the way, but when we're rehearsing it, that Matty's been born and therefore it's her memory of somebody that hadn't existed but was in all of everything. Space has given us the ability to kind of imagine that, and I think that's the really important thing.
Which is, I mean, what every play does, right? We're just zeroing in on a relationship, and it's just a very extreme way of doing that. I mean, I remember talking to my dad on a film when I was like, oh, I'm writing this set on Pluto, feeling like vaguely embarrassed about it. He was like, can't you just set it underwater or on the Arctic or somewhere? And I was like, oh, shit, yeah. But ultimately, it all, I think it does exactly what you're saying. It's just, it becomes a lens through which is kind of what all science fiction is, despite the fact I'm claiming it's not science fiction. Science fiction is just a way of getting a bit of distance and looking at ourselves in a more intensive way, basically. And I think that's what it does.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if the play's changed in any palpable way from when you wrote it to it being on the stage now, and I guess as a secondary part of that question, how you strike the balance between spelling things out to people and having people kind of guess or create their own interpretations of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm writing it, I'm not thinking, oh, well, I better make sure this is vague so no one, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just telling the stuff. What actually the play is doing is, rather than not telling you stuff, it's kind of not putting anything extra on top of that. There's not a point where someone stops and goes, but wait a minute, you're telling me that you know what I mean? Like, all I'm doing is just not having that stuff in there, basically. It's not like the exposition is like a small little moments, which is very hard, because if you're writing a play set in an environment that's not commonplace to everyone, you have to establish the rules of the game at certain points. So like the first scene is, we've been out of contact this long and we can't go anywhere, you know, like it drip feeds in. But the change is, I mean, I typed the first draft of the first act, and then I had to stop because I had to do something. I had another deadline, so I put it kind of ritualistically in a folder, and I sellotaped it, and I kind of put it in a drawer, and I said some, prayers and stuff. And then I went and did my other job. And then when I came back, I took the folder out, but I didn't open it and look at it. I got a pen and paper, and I wrote the entire first act out again, like from memory, in an effort to like distill, so it was like I'd forget the not so good stuff and hopefully remember the good stuff. And then I wrote it out again and again and again by hand, just over and over and over and over again, because I thought that was another way of like worrying about it being in space and getting over complicated and everything, being like, okay, I'm grounding it, I'm going really kind of analog with this, and I'm really going to think very, very carefully, meticulously about all of it. But then when we were redrafting it, and the notes that you gave me, it was stuff like, it was mostly cuts, wasn't it? It was like you've kind of over-explained this, or you've made it too definitive that this is the answer, and things like that. So there wasn't a vast amount of actually rewriting of each scene. It was mostly to strip in more and more and more stuff out. The ends changed a little bit, but apart from that, I mean, that's usually like no one actually really ever sees my first drafts. Like they just are constantly kind of washed over. Like when I reopen the document or whatever I'm working on, I don't just start from where I left off. I start right from the beginning again. So I'm just constantly kind of combing through it over and over and over again. So when I hand it in, it's like 1.5 or whatever, So.
But one day, Ali did bring the exercise books that he'd written the play out by hand in rehearsals, and he kind of showed them to us, and we all went to touch them, he went, no, and took them away. He was like, I hold the book.
My little scratchy black writing. It's like something you'd find in my house after I killed a bunch of people, you know what I mean? What is this? This is writing about Pluto? What's going on? Yeah. No wonder he did all those terrible things, yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
Do you find staging your plays at the Royal Court gives something that staging it elsewhere probably wouldn't do?
I felt that when I was commissioned by the Royal Court, that was like a starting pistol to be like, do whatever you want, but you better be kind of pushing yourself. Not necessarily bring us, something all singing, all dancing, but there's an unspoken thing of like, well, if you're doing your play here, it's you look at the lineage and everything, and it's very easy to get a bit overwhelmed by everything that's been on here before. But that's the main thing that I feel whenever I come here is like, I don't want to do something that I've done before, and I don't want to do something that's easy. I thought when I got commissioned, I thought I had a thing that I was going to do, and then I kind of thought, it sounds a bit cocky to say it'd be easy. It wouldn't have been easy, but I was like, no, I'm not really. I won't learn anything in the writing of this thing. So that was quite a big deal for me, to feel like it had to be hard, and it had to be because the court has got an amazing ability to take risks, and you've got to take advantage of that, So I felt like that, but I mean, that's about it. I mean, in a real, I write a play for any theatre, right? It's a huge responsibility. I take it very seriously. Like it's a big deal, because I just feel, if I'm asking you all to show up and, babysitters, public whatever, wherever we are in the country, wherever, pay for a seat, it's quite expensive, and you got to sit here and you got to sit and kind of be scared to fart and make sure your phone's, you know what I mean? Like all of these things you got to do, and I just think, well, if I'm doing that, I better make sure that every breath that happens in this play has to be experienced live and has to be theatrical. Like the bones and the skin, everything in this play has to be kind of aggressively theatrical. So I think that's kind of my general, what I heap on myself when writing any play. But I guess with the Royal Court, there is just a sense of, well, yeah, all right. I mean, because I did this play Talk Show here a couple of years ago, and I'm very proud of that play, and I love that play too. But I remember thinking, I don't want to do a track off the same album, And I thought, if I'm going back to the court, it's like I gotta do something special for myself, not to kind of show off to the building, but it's an opportunity you're given, and I don't know. How do you feel about that? Commission people for here.
Well, one of the things that I really noticed since I started here, and I think I was really naive about it before I started, ridiculously, pathetically, was the amount of scrutiny the actual plays get here.
Yeah.
And before I got this job, I'd never worked at the Royal Court before, and I'd sat in the audience really scrutinising the plays in a way which I maybe hadn't at other places, going, so you think you're the Royal Court, so therefore what are the plays? And there's something really interesting, and that really does happen, and I think the audiences come really to want to really think about what the plays are about and what the writers are doing. So there is definitely an added pressure, which isn't to do with status, but is to do with history of the way that we talk about the plays that have been on here, and people going, so what's the next one? So I think that is a pressure for writers, and definitely was something I was naive about.
I was really interested about what you said about your creative process and the way that you write, because it has a lot in common with what we see in the play in terms of a replaying, particularly in an analogue form rather than a digital form, and that kind of going over and over and distilling. And I noticed also, so there's that kind of connection between your own creative process and memory in the play. But I also found it very interesting that what you've done is you've taken your characters to a space where they have food and shelter, they have light. They don't have to build anything, they don't have to create anything, they simply exist. And I wonder what that, it's not Robinson Crusoe's island. They don't have to build a hut or anything, it's all there for them. And I wondered what that sort of said about the kind of creative process that you go through and the role of creativity for your characters.
Yeah.
Good question.
I don't know. I mean, God, yeah. I mean, the repetition thing. I mean, the stuff that I was. Because if you read it again, if you go see it, all through the first, there are lines that are repeated by other characters, and there are like half lines, and there are lines that are twisted in words, and kind of even just sentence structure. And the things that I was looking at for that were like novels, really, like Faulkner and Thomas Pynchon, and people who it was just so dense. And I was like, I would love to a play like that where I can just get the immediate punch emotionally, hopefully, and then afterwards be like, man, I need to unpick why I feel the way I do, because I'm not entirely sure why, you know? And I thought that was kind of exciting. I mean, all the stuff about my process mirroring the characters or whatever, I mean, what I found particularly weird about it is, I'm sure you cannot tell, but I'm a very anxious person, and kind of history of issues of anxiety and, you know, bits and bobs like that. And it used to be when I look at my older plays, or not that much older, but there's usually a character in it who is anxious. I mean, Gilda in this is self-confessedly slightly neurotic and anxious and whatever, but like, but what's weird is that as I've gotten older, it's like the anxiety's gotten into a form of a play itself. Like the plays are anxious, the plays are kind of fidgety, and they're not in the right order, and they skitter around, and things drop off, and things, you know, and I find that kind of interesting. But something that is not exactly that, but something that is related is that I wanted the experience of the characters to be mirrored in the room when you're watching it. So a point where she is saying, I saw her, she was here, you're going, yeah man, she was in scenes 2 and 4, like, you know, like you know, like that you're on the wrong side of the argument, you know. And I thought that was so interesting to have a sensation where, I mean, this is slightly Ponzi thing I was trying to do, which is almost impossible to tell if it's actually successful or not, but I was really kind of obsessed with the idea of like writing to the unconscious, or writing to like the back of your brain rather than the front. So if I repeat a phrase, or if I repeat half of a phrase, or if I repeat the kind of rhythm of something and just slot that in underneath what's going on, your brain will sort of hopefully kind of pick up on it and go, something's feel a bit weird, don't know why, but something's kind of clicked in there. And hopefully that feeling will just accumulate, and that's the same thing's happening to the characters. They're going, no, this isn't my story, this is your story, this is my, no, she wasn't in here. And that hopefully eventually that you kind of mesh with them, just as what happens in the second act, as all the characters start meshing together in their stories and things like that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing about it being they're never going to run out of water, they're never going to run out of food, that's like the rules of the game. I mean, that's almost a bit of a plot cheat, really, because probably they would at some point. But that's not interesting. I don't really care. I'm not interested. What's interesting is what happens if I put those people in a box and shake it for however many years they're there, and that's up for grabs, really. But yeah.
Some people here, yes, at the back there.
Hiya. I wanted to ask, I know this might sound a bit strange, but I find something quite comforting in like an apocalyptic world, because it means that everything's kind of back to basics, and none of this kind of stuff really matters anymore that we value as important. And I guess you must feel the same, otherwise you wouldn't have an interest in writing something like this.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, part of me gets what you mean. I guess there is something comforting about, well, it's all gone. I don't need to worry about what the guys at work think of me, because I just have to like feed myself now. I can't say that was like what I was kind of shooting for. But I guess that's kind of interesting too. Is that, I mean, which ties into that thing where she says at the end, "Are we still waiting?" She's like, "No, we're not waiting for anything anymore." And that the people who last the longest, who survive the play or survive most of the terrible things that happen, are so Clark lasts the longest of the blokes, and Gilda lasts obviously, are the people who tie the meaning of themselves to love and to other people. And Clark seems kind of probably to some people like a bit of a dick when he first appears. He's kind of insensitive and vulgar and, you know, kind of an idiot, but I don't think there's ever a second where you can doubt that he doesn't really care for everyone that's around him. Just because he's calling them a cock doesn't mean he doesn't like them, you know what I mean? And I think that's the shape of the play, really, is that the ones who are trying to either cling on to the past, or cling on to kind of ephemera, or cling on to some notion of how of maths is going to save us all, or whatever, like those, they're going to be driven crazy, because really the only thing you can hold on to if literally everything disappears, the real idea of what home is, if home physically goes, if language goes, the real idea is just, you know, someone else, someone that you love and care about. And if you strip away everything in people, that's probably one of the only things that's going to be left, I would hope. Anyway, some kind of compulsive need to look after each other, I would hope.
Wow, that is a place to end on, isn't it?
Wow, bombshell.
Thank you very much.